So Egypt has to be one of my least favorite factions in the game, if not the least. Egypt's roster is very questionable as a whole. They are the only Hellenic faction that does not have Hoplites. Egypt is plagued with a slew of problems, but I won't go into depth. Because they don't have Hoplites, they have to rely on their spear roster to support the rear of the swordsmen because they can't hold a line forever. Still, Egypt does have some interesting units, such as the Galatian Royal Guard and even Royal Thorax Swordsmen, a unit identical to one of the Lewted units. As they are an African faction, they have access to African elephants. Egypt, however, has their own units too. Unfortunately, only the Egyptian cav can prove worthy in an army. Egyptian infantry do not have the stats to stay in a prolonged fight, and their pikemen will get massacred if they are caught without their pikes down. Egypt has access to chariots, which are good for killing infantry that would otherwise massacre Egypt. Their missile infantry selection is quite solid. They have Nubian bowmen, which have 150 range, and they can bring as many as they like, making skirmishing fights quite nice for them. Egypt and other successors tend to rely on high-cost units, like elephants, to get the majority of their kills, which can be problematic if they can be checked early on. Egypt, without elephants or chariots, still has shock cav, but as mentioned earlier with Macedon, they only have a high-tier shock cav, not a mid-tier. Egypt suffers immensely against the Swabi because, besides thorax swordsmen and pikemen, other units can be very cost ineffective against the fast-moving, hard-hitting units that they can bring. Galatian Royal Guard can check even sword masters, but can they catch up to them? Egyptian cavalry can beat riders of the hunt, but can they beat noble riders? It is true that chariots can really hurt the Swabi, but they have options. To summarize, Egypt is probably the hardest successor to win with. Their melee roster tends to rely more on high-tier units. Their spear roster lacks killing power, and their missile roster is strong. Winning with Egypt, especially if you're new, is an accomplishment in the campaign. So give them a go if you like to have a missile advantage. In my opinion, the Egyptians beat the Jerusalem Kingdom possibly, but they lose to the Swabi. So what can you expect your Egyptian army to look like? Some people who are really edgy like to use carrying axemen. I definitely do not. I would rather use Royal Thorax Swordsmen. Royal Thorax Swordsmen are better in melee than Royal Peltas, even though they have less melee attack. Egyptian infantry are very questionable, almost useless. They can be cannon fodder, but these guys will rout very quickly. Carrion axemen also rout quickly, but they're the only axe unit that Egypt can bring. And I mean, Egypt and Macedon are the only successors that have axes, really. So you can use these guys on the flanks. They act like the real spears too, which is nice. I don't overuse them for sure. Galatian swordsmen are like the Galatian swordsmen of the Galatians, except they're much, much worse. They do have the health and morale that the Galatians don't, but they don't have the base armor. They have the other melee stats too, however. Soviet Cultist Beasts of War Pack. For spears, like I said, you don't have Hoplites, so you have to rely on units like the Rail Spears and maybe even Leopard Warriors, depending on if you have the DLC or not. Pikemen wise, just like the Epirus army, you can bring Hellenic Royal Guard. They do have 90 armor. 60 of it is base. Thorax pikemen are probably the way to go as Egypt, however. For missile infantry, this is where things get really interesting. Nubian bowmen have 150 range, 35 missile damage. You can even bring Egyptian archers, but I don't recommend it because they're just like regular archers. Egyptian javelin men are pretty solid, not too bad. I prefer Peltas. And then you have your mercenaries. Shock cavalry wise, you have Ptolemaic Cav. Melee cavalry, you have Egyptian Cav. Missile cavalry, you have your basic roster. Chariots, you have your chariot. Elephants, African war elephants, and African elephants. We went over those with Carthage. Most of the times, people will bring pikemen as Egypt, and if you know how Egypt works and you pike box, there's obviously a good reason or explanation to that. Egypt is a really bad faction in my opinion. It's really, really hard to win with them, and it's not because they don't have hoplites, but it's because of their sword melee infantry. It's because of their lack of a mid-tier shock cav unit. It's because their best melee cav is Egyptian cavalry, and these guys don't have a lot of armor, which means on the charge against shock cav, they'll get hit a lot. Galatian Royal Guard is nice. You can't get them as a general, however. They are good. They are pretty good against noble fighters, but they're kind of untrustworthy in prolonged fights because sometimes they actually tire themselves out. They can beat Oathsworn though. That's the interesting thing about them. So if you're going up against a Celtic faction that have Oathsworn, it might be a good idea to bring Galatian Royal Guard over Royal Dark Swordsmen. But that's just my opinion. So if I were to bring 3 pikemen, I might bring 2 Thorax Swordsmen and then 2 Royal Thorax Swordsmen. Spear-wise, I rarely use Leopard Warriors, but they kind of are useful. I prefer Thurios Spears. Egypt also has access to Levi Thurios Spears, but I don't trust them a lot. I might bring one of them every now and then, but that's about it. Missile Infantry, Nubian Bowmen get the job done. I bring a max of 4, minimum of 3. Egyptian Cavalry, 4, maybe a Ptolemaic Cav here and there. Or if I don't want to bring Ptolemaic Cav, every now and then I'll use Chariots. Chariots are, they cost the same as Galatian Royal Guard, so if you want to take out a Galatian Royal Guard and replace it with something else, use Chariots, as long as it's allowed. So yeah, I'm going to take a 15-second break and I'll be back with you guys.